In 2015, director J.J. Abrams delivered what was one of the most anticipated films in Hollywood history. 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, and 32 years after Return of the Jedi, Star Wars was making its return in Episode 7, The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens was able to give what audiences loved about Star Wars. It set out to excite those that were in the theater for their first Star Wars movie, but more importantly, it was speaking to those who were there in 99 and 77. The Force Awakens was concerned about you. It cared about you, and it sought to please you at every turn. Episode 7 was many things. Adventurous, fantastic, beautiful, heartwarming, and heart-wrenching. And most of all, Episode 7 was comforting. The Force Awakens codified for its audience that these myths and legends were real, not only to the characters in the movie, but to us.
A magical power holding together good and evil, the dark side and the light. The crazy thing is, it's true. The Force, the Jedi, all of it. It's all true.
A powerful statement. The Star Wars we grew up loving was back. We were able to jump right in with our favorite smuggler who was back at his old tricks, and still as charming as ever. The princess turned general who could inspire hope in both the rebellion and her audience. And some of our old favorites that made us feel at home in the galaxy once again. We were also introduced to the characters that would be taking center stage this time around. Those who were just starting their journeys in a galaxy far, far away. The hotshot flyboy and master pilot Poe Dameron. The stormtrooper turned resistance fighter Finn. The force-wielding orphan scavenger who dreams of discovering who she is, Rey. And the angsty, flawed apprentice of Darkside Master Supreme Leader Snoke, Kylo Ren. After a brand new adventure that brought back the excitement and the grandeur of the original, The Force Awakens left us filled with hope for the future and plenty of questions of what was to come. After the Resistance was able to hold off the First Order, destroying Starkiller Base and completing the map that led to the legendary Luke Skywalker, we followed our hero Rey as she journeyed up the grandiose staircase that may have been built by the first Jedi. She found the myth himself, Luke Skywalker, standing on the edge of a cliff facing the sea. With her, she wielded his lightsaber, the one that old Ben Kenobi passed on to him what seemed like a lifetime ago. And as we spiraled around the beautiful island planet of Ahch-To, on a literal cliffhanger, Luke, with a look of pain and knowledge on his face, as he gazed at Rey and his lightsaber. John Williams' goosebump-evoking score carried us out to the credits. And then, audiences took to the internet to do what Star Wars fans do best. Theorize on all these questions that the mystery box of The Force Awakens left for them. What was going to come next? I say all of this to set the stage of where Abrams and The Force Awakens had left us in 2015. And every day that followed up until December 14th, 2017. Because if you're watching this, you've seen what comes next, and you likely have very strong feelings about it. Cut to 2017. Enter Rian Johnson and The Last Jedi. Of all the things fans can say about The Last Jedi, the one thing that can't be debated is that every single facet of this movie is being debated. And that's good. Johnson said himself, in reference to the conversation that is happening around Episode 8, the goal is never to divide or make people upset, but I do think the conversations that are happening were going to have to happen at some point if Star Wars is going to grow, move forward, and stay vital. In order to let something as massive as Star Wars grow, two things needed to happen. A director needed to step up and find a way to create real, consequential change that asked the right questions for its universe and mythology. And the fans had to let that wash over them, and maybe for the first time reconsider what makes Star Wars, Star Wars. As fans, we all have expectations of how these movies should work. We should see the struggle between light and dark in our Force users. We should see daring and roguish non-Force users swooping in to save the day. We should see deep mysteries revealed, destiny, adventure, lessons for our heroes and ourselves, and maybe most of all, hope. I'm sure you have your own thoughts on what makes Star Wars, and I ask you to think about those and try and consider what The Last Jedi is asking you to do with them. We were told that The Last Jedi was going to defy these expectations and do something new.
This is not going to go the way you think.
And in watching the movie, The Last Jedi is absolutely not concerned with what comforts their audience or the Hollywood system that feeds it. Instead, we get a text filled with passion and bold action that feels akin to the radical change that the young George Lucas brought to the new Hollywood movement in the 1970s and 80s. The Last Jedi is a call to its own universe as well as a Hollywood culture that is obsessed with the franchise. We get something that actively seeks to serve the narrative at all costs, developing characters instead of resolving fan theories, in order to move its world forward in new, surprising ways that work on a uniquely human level, as well as a galactic one. The Last Jedi is rejecting a certain Potterism that Hollywood franchises have adapted. The Harry Potter stories and franchises that have followed suggest that everyone is related. The person you crush on in middle school will be your spouse. Mythic storytelling has rarely been so small, so juvenile, so petty. Johnson's film shuns all of that, and Hollywood's current plot is everything approach. Johnson opens up the canvas of Star Wars by allowing narrative choices that defy expectations, but serve his characters in ways that Potterism simply cannot. Heroes should sometimes fail. Certain journeys should be dead ends. We learn from that failure. 8 movies into the main franchise, and it becomes time to go deeper rather than simply wider. The Last Jedi does not try and reflect your personal experience with Star Wars. It tries to expand it. It isn't a mirror with a vanity light. It's a map to something new. The Last Jedi speaks to the same myths that Han Solo reassured us about in The Force Awakens, but instead of telling you that what you already know is real and that you're sure to see it again, The Last Jedi asks you to consider the fundamental flaw in hero worship, in deifying your legends.
If you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure, hypocrisy, hubris.
That's not true.
At the height of their powers, they allowed Darth Sidious to rise, create the Empire, and wipe them out. It was a Jedi Master who was responsible for the training and creation of Darth Vader.
One of the film's main points is that when you hold your legends to impossibly high standards, they are sure to let you down. Johnson presents that theme to us over and over in each plotline. We see Rose starstruck by the hero of the Resistance, Finn, just as he's about to abandon the Resistance to save the one woman who definitely does not need his saving. We see it again with Kylo and Snoke. Kylo begging Rey to let the past die, and Snoke, seemingly one of the strongest dark side Force users in this new trilogy, only to be felled in an instant. No legacy or myth to leave behind. We see it with Poe, the hero of his storyline. We want Holdo to believe him, to put her faith in him like any good character should do to serve the protagonist. But we don't get that. We get a choice that serves the greater narrative. And maybe the hardest pill to swallow. We find Luke riddled with regret rather than being a badass green lightsaber-wielding Jedi Master. He's overwhelmed with the mistakes he made in his past and with the legend of what it is to be a Jedi. He believes that all he tried to build was for nothing because of his own preconceived notions of what the Jedi were and who he was in this story. He's obsessed with the fact that Luke Skywalker failed, and it destroys him. Luke, after witnessing his new Jedi Order fall and his nephew turn to the darkness on his watch, comes to the conclusion that the Jedi are not helping. They've been a source of war and corruption, perpetuating a cycle of darkness. He decides the Jedi need to go away so that the light can rise from something more worthy. He knows the galaxy is better than what the Jedi have given it, and so he disengages. The Last Jedi finds what would challenge Luke the most, and puts him up against it, thereby creating conflict to drive both the story and character. And he tells Rey this, that none of this matters, that the Jedi need to end, that stuff you loved, the Jedi Council, the teachings of the old masters, they don't always work. They're broken. Luke directly asks us to look at the past and, rather than revering it, look at what didn't work and move on. Our faith in the Jedi was flawed, and rather than alluding to that, The Last Jedi confronts that head on and focuses on actually learning from these flaws, trying to make something new. This idea of leaving behind what you considered to be untouchable, mythical, is solidified in the scene with Yoda and the tree. Yoda acts as Johnson in a way. He laughs like the silly old wise man we know from Empire as he calls down a lightning bolt to burn away the old tree, what remained of the Jedi Order he served for his entire life. The organization that Luke and Yoda dedicated themselves to burns up before their eyes, and trying to recapture something that has already had its time and ultimately failed is fruitless. The Jedi Order could not stop the dark, could not bring balance. Not really. Kylo Ren is living proof of that. The Jedi failed Anakin, who in turn failed his galaxy up until the very end of his life, but the consequences of his actions are felt through his grandson. So why resurrect an archaic religion when you have the chance to build something new? Yoda knows this, and it is what he passes down to Luke in his final lesson, where Luke saw despair and ultimate failure. Yoda sees as a chance for renewal. Where The Force Awakens sought to comfort you, The Last Jedi sees that being stagnant is a great barrier of the Star Wars narrative. That reverence of the past is what led the Empire to turn into the First Order. It's what leads Kylo Ren to try and be Darth Vader. It leads to just saying the same thing over and over. Yoda and Johnson believe it is time for Star Wars to say something new. Something built from looking to our past and learning from it. Yoda not only teaches us that deifying our myths is wrong, but he has another important lesson that speaks to the heart of this movie.
The greatest teacher, failure is.
Luke isn't the only character who learns through failure. We see that thread in all of our main characters. We see them fail, and we see them begin to change from that failure, to learn and grow. Poe Dameron begins The Last Jedi with a joke. And whether or not his joke to Hux is funny to you isn't the point. The point is that, in the face of danger, Poe is sure-footed, confident, borderline arrogant. He's invincible. He's Poe Dameron, damn it! He carries the swagger that we loved in Han Solo. But that swagger isn't working here. He can't seem to charm his way out of danger. And that swagger leads to the death of many of his fellow Resistance members, and earns him a demotion from General Leia herself. After this, Poe continues to shoot first and ask questions later. He leads the plot against Holdo, believing she is gravely mistaken about what is best for the Resistance. He sends Finn and Rose on the mission to Canto Bight and actively mutinies against his Vice Admiral. By the end of the second act of the movie, just as Poe and the Resistance arrive on Crate, Poe realizes that his hot-headedness, his belief that he is the hero of his own story, is his downfall. He then leads the Resistance to retreating when he knows the fight can't be won. He actually saves lives. In the movie you've seen a dozen times, the hot-headed rebel stands up to his superior to save the day, and it turns out that he's right. His plan is better than the Admiral. But not this day. This day, Poe fails. He's constantly wrong, and in that, he learns that he should listen to those around him, to ask the right questions, and to listen to those who command respect. He grows, and that growth helps him save the day, to be a different kind of hero. But this isn't where lessons on failure end for The Last Jedi. That mission that Poe sends Finn and Rose on quickly became one of the more controversial sections of the movie. What Finn and Rose do on Canto Bight does not succeed. That much is true. But that certainly does not mean that the movie is failing to accomplish something uniquely important. This section of The Last Jedi begins with Finn deciding to take Leia's binary beacon, a tracking device that Rey will follow once she's finished on Ahch-To. Thinking that the First Order has all but won, Finn decides he's going to flee the Resistance to safety, so that when Rey returns, she isn't put in danger. Finn spent a good bit of The Force Awakens running away from the First Order and concerning himself with Rey's safety. When Han and Chewie take him to Starkiller Base, he admits that he isn't there for the Resistance. He wants to save Rey. Now, Finn is making a similar choice by leaving the Resistance entirely because he thinks it will help keep Rey safe. He doesn't want Rey to show up just as the First Order annihilates the Resistance. Finn is a good person. Up until this point, he wants to be free and to protect the one person he has who is important to him. But he is certainly not a rebel. Upon landing on Canto Bight, Finn is enamored by the beauty of the planet. He's never seen anything quite like it. Rose quickly points out, however, that there is more than meets the eye. When Finn begins to look deeper, he sees seeds of corruption, greed, and vanity. And it's at this point that Finn begins to think of a world larger than him and Rey. The casino on Canto Bight is able to offer the perfect backdrop for this realization. The Last Jedi is able to paint a picture of everything that is wrong with the world, all wrapped up in one hive of beautiful scum and villainy. After landing themselves in jail and meeting Benicio del Toro's codebreaker, codenamed DJ, Finn is given a foil to the idealistic Rose, a man living just for himself with no sense of responsibility beyond his survival. Rose challenges this idea when she speaks to the young boy in the Fathier stable. Her words speak of a bigger picture, fighting for what you love, hope for the future, and rebellion. Rose speaks to the core of the rebel vision. Those girls and boys on Canto Bight who light up at the appearance of these Resistance heroes. Finn can see the stakes here, and he can actually do something to shift the outcome for the better. Despite all of their losses, the Resistance will always help those in need. Through Rose and the Codebreaker, Finn is set up with a choice: cynicism and self-interest, or idealism to fight for a cause bigger than himself. Finn must begin to ask if his actions are going to continue to be for self-survival, or if he will fight for the Resistance, for the galaxy. And we get that answer in one of the most powerful exchanges in the movie. After Phasma is bested by Finn, she tells him, "You were always scum." And Finn replies, finally sure of his newfound self,
Rebel scum.
It is at that moment that Finn commits. He knows he cannot help Rey. He doesn't have the means to. He never did. She doesn't need his help. It's the galaxy that needs his help, and he has the power to make a difference to the galaxy and to the Resistance. Finn learns that even through his failures, he was able to spark hope in those around him. He accepts his new role by flying headfirst towards the First Order, ready to give his life to save something bigger than himself. In The Last Jedi, failure and change go hand in hand. For Rey and Kylo Ren, they notice the failure in the heroes of their past, Luke and Snoke, respectively, and they learn from that failure. They refuse to repeat the mistakes of the past and choose to carve their own path. Change is everywhere in The Last Jedi. That much is obvious. From the moment that Luke tosses Anakin's lightsaber over his shoulder, you know that you're in for a different ride than you expected. The Force Awakens gave such reverence to setting up that moment, and in line with our aforementioned themes of not deifying legends, Luke tosses that lightsaber away like it is something he never wished to see again. These mythic symbols of power in the Star Wars universe are being stripped of that power, and we are being asked to look at what is underneath, to gaze into these characters for who they are, not what you want them to be. With the amount of ancillary Star Wars content we've gotten over the last 40 years, it can be hard to separate the information we want or come to expect about a character or plotline, and the information we actually need for a specific narrative. Over the years, audiences have grown to expect encyclopedia-like information to be given to them about each character. This is sort of a side effect of that same Potterism from earlier. And concerning Star Wars specifically, people come to expect that amount of information because we have things like the Legends Extended Universe, the animated TV shows, canon novels and comic books, and an entire prequel trilogy to complement the original. And although that additional information is exciting, if explaining it takes away from the narrative, then generally it is better left to that ancillary content. Take Snoke. He's positioned to be this big bad emperor type figure in The Force Awakens. He's the bad guy, dark side user in a hood. He's menacing. His motives are mysterious. And he's training the next Darth Vader. And that's all we ever really know about him.
Snoke is using you for your power. When he gets what he wants, he'll crush you.
And it's through Snoke's aggressive and arrogant actions in The Last Jedi that Kylo comes to believe his father. He sees Snoke's arrogance as weakness, and ultimately, it leads to Kylo defeating him. The Last Jedi is aware that we are watching a blockbuster, and in all blockbusters, the characters, especially the main villain, need to live to the end to give our heroes something to do. So, rather than play into this trope, The Last Jedi does something much more valuable with its time. It invests it into Kylo Ren, setting him up to go head-to-head with Rey in the finale of the series. It builds to give him real conflict, a significant point of view, and a challenge to overcome. Kylo sees the mistakes of the past, and he seeks to reset everything.
Let the past die. Kill it, if you have to. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be.
No, we'll likely never learn Snoke's backstory in Episode 9, but The Last Jedi makes it very clear that Snoke's backstory never mattered in this narrative. It wasn't about him, it has always been about Kylo. The narrative seeks to strengthen Kylo Ren as a character. Kylo ultimately takes advantage of Snoke's arrogance and eliminates him, a moment that acts on themes that Star Wars itself has presented in the past, with Luke warning the Emperor in Return of the Jedi.
Your overconfidence is your weakness.
Your faith in your friends is yours.
Using Snoke's arrogance, a trait often seen in Star Wars villains, Kylo is able to get the better of his master, cutting him in half and ending the reign of who we believe to be the main villain halfway through the trilogy. It's beautiful, really, because now Kylo is free from expectation. He doesn't need to try and be Vader. He can be Kylo Ren, free from any preconceived notion of movies past. Rey, too, benefits from being freed from these notions of the past. She spends the movie searching for the answer to the question that The Force Awakens posed. Who is she? For so much of her time trying to answer that question, Rey looks to the past to discover who she is. Who are her parents? Where does she come from? She looks to these questions in order to find purpose, but it is through her lessons with Luke, seeing how this legend of the past has failed, but also noting what he has learned. It is through her attempts to truly understand the Force, to put her full faith in the power that binds us, and it is through her conversations with Kylo that she is able to look inward rather than backward. It is then, when she becomes introspective, when she leans into the Force and into herself, that she figures out who she is. She's no one. Her parents were not Skywalkers, or Kenobis, or clones of the Emperor. They were drunkards who traded her away. And yet she matters. She is a powerful Force wielder. She can be whoever she chooses. Her destiny is not in the past, but what she makes it. She isn't beholden to some cycle. She is her own person, making her own choices. And she chooses to do good, even when the odds are stacked against her. Rey looks out the window of Snoke's ship. The Resistance is being obliterated. She believes all of her friends to be dead. Luke has given up. The legendary Luke Skywalker has abandoned all hope. She has witnessed Kylo Ren kill his master and then fought by his side to safety. But when he asks her to join him to eliminate everything in order to rule the galaxy themselves, she still refuses. The Last Jedi is teaching us that anyone can be the hero. We don't need to be a legend. We don't need to be Luke to have a place in this world. The next Skywalker can be an orphaned scavenger, a slave on Canto Bight, or a farm boy from a desert planet. It doesn't matter where you come from. It's the choices you make that determine who you are. Rey embodies just that, and it's spectacular. All of these things, destiny, choice, failure, legacy, the choices that Last Jedi makes involving each of those is purposeful and creates very human, dynamic characters in each of its heroes. Each facet of the movie strengthens those choices. Every set, every costume, every shot. Rian Johnson's directorial hand is strong and purposeful. He writes these characters to be conflicted yet relatable. We want to see them succeed, but even when they don't, we see them grow because of that failure, and they take that growth to achieve new heights. Okay, you might say, but that still doesn't mean it feels like Star Wars to me. And to that, I say again, take a look at what you've seen. No, it doesn't feel like Star Wars the way that The Force Awakens does. It isn't copying or being cyclical. It's using its past as building blocks to move forward to something new while digging its roots down deep. Never before have we gotten a movie that can so beautifully depict the Force and how it affects all living things. In The Last Jedi, the Force truly surrounds us. It binds us. For the Star Wars universe, it is what drives life, and as Luke says, the Force is too big to have ever belonged exclusively to the Jedi religion.
That Force does not belong to the Jedi. To say that if the Jedi die, the light dies is vanity. Can you feel that?
The light side of the Force needs wielders. But those wielders don't have to be Jedi. The Jedi's greatest lesson was in their failure. We should learn from that failure and continue exploring the light that the Force has to bring. Because as Luke learns, you can't just let the past die. You can't kill your past. If you try, it's only going to haunt you. So look to it and learn from it.
The rebellion is reborn today. The war is just beginning. And I will not be the last Jedi.
The child from the very end of the movie embodies that. He carries the light. The Force surrounds him because he believes, just as Rey does. Just as Luke did when he turned off his targeting computer so long ago. We've been given a movie that tells a story of failure, change, and growth. It deconstructs mythic tropes and lets us dream of a new future for something we love. The Last Jedi might be an upsetting movie for you, and that's okay. Let those feelings happen. If you didn't like The Last Jedi as a narrative, as a piece of film, that's fine. There is no objective right answer. I think The Last Jedi itself would agree that seeing something from just one point of view is dangerous. What's more important is how you arrive at your ultimate opinion for this film. So after all of this, I ask you to watch the movie again, or at least sit back and reconsider what you know, and let go of your pretenses, your nostalgia, and your expectations. See The Last Jedi for what it is, not what it isn't. It is doing something beautiful, something unique. It's allowing something that is so deep in our culture to flourish and evolve. You love Star Wars, so let it grow.